R1b, which now constitutes Europeans, frequently appears in Western Central Africa. When and where did they come from? This video will help you answer this question. It's coming up. R1b is the most common paternal lineage in Western Europe. This haplogroup accounts for over 80% of the population in Ireland, the Scottish Highlands, Western Wales, the Atlantic coast of France, the Basque Country, and Catalonia. However, unusually, men with the Y-DNA haplogroup R1b can also be found in Africa. The paternal gene R1b found in Africa is SNP-V88. Today, except for individuals from Southern Europe and West Asia, most of R1b-V88 can be found in the Sahel. The Sahel lies below the Sahara Desert, a belt up to 1,000 kilometers (620 miles) wide, stretching 5,400 kilometers (3,600 miles) from the Atlantic Ocean to the Red Sea. It is mainly in grasslands and savanna areas, where shrubs grow. The climate is similar to that of the Sahara but less extreme. Traditionally, people living in the Sahel are nomadic, raising livestock and partly farming. Among the Sahel region, R1b-V88 can be found at high frequency in people who speak the Chadic language among Afroasiatic languages. Chad contains over 150 languages. The group that speaks this language is located at the latitude 10 degrees north of the equator. In particular, it is observed at a very high rate in ethnic groups living near Lake Chad. The countries bordering Lake Chad are Chad to the east, Nigeria to the west, and Niger to the north. As you can see on the map, it is also a place where various ethnic groups in Africa live densely. Ethnic groups around Lake Chad include the Kanuri, Shoa Arabs, Kitoko, Fulbe, Hausa, and Mandara. The Berbers are widely distributed in northern Africa. In particular, R1b-V88 accounts for a relatively high proportion of the Berbers of the Egyptian-Libyan border region. That rate is 23%. For the Hausa of Sudan, it is 40%. For men from the Niger and Fulani peoples of Cameroon, it is 54%. The Fulani are also called Fulbe. In men from the Chadic peoples of northern Nigeria and Cameroon, R1b-V88 is observed in the 30 to 90% range. Who are their ancestors, and when and where did they come from? Anatolia likely was where Y-DNA R1b ancestors descended from Central Asia and settled before spreading to Europe. These are people belonging to R1b-1p25. This is genuinely R1b's homeland. They were herded here. Their descendants are divided into three groups. R1b-M335 settled in Anatolia, R1b-P297 migrated to Europe, and R1b-V88 advanced to Africa. For details on the diffusion process of the subbranch of R1b-P297, one of the ancestors of current Europeans, please take a look at the video linked to the top right. It was V88 that migrated from the new pasture more than R1b-P297. They are believed to have lived in the Levant. You are looking at a map of Anatolia and the Fertile Crescent from 8000 to 10,000 BCE by the World History Encyclopedia. This map shows areas where cattle, sheep, goats, and pigs are domesticated. In addition, the place where the grain was domesticated and grown is also indicated. Pastoral farming was mainly done in Anatolia. It is primarily concentrated in the upper reaches of the Euphrates and Tigris rivers. The Levant region, where R1b-V88 initially settled, was cultivated by acclimatizing grains rather than livestock. As descendants of hunters who hunted mammoths in Central Asia and Siberia, they may have needed land suitable for grazing for their meat. They set off in search of new lands. They went to Europe first, before advancing to Africa. They may have left for Europe around 10,000 BCE. DNA from remains dating to V88, with the earliest dating between 9300 and 700 BCE, has now been identified at the Iron Gate, on the border of Serbia and Romania. R1b-V88 is also placed at the Ukraine Neolithic site, the Czech funnel beaker site, and the globular amphiculture site. It is also found at Mesolithic sites in Germany and Spain. This means that R1b-V88 spread throughout Europe between 9000 and 2500 BCE. V88 has also been identified in ancient remains from Sardinia. Some of the other R1b-V88s are destined for Africa and across the Sahara to the Lake Chad region. Why did they have to make the arduous journey across the desert to Chad? I think we should find out together. The migration of the R1b-V88 population into Europe and Africa occurred around 10,000 BCE. It is necessary to understand the vegetation of the last glacial maximum, LGM, period, to understand why they abandoned the Fertile Crescent and tried to migrate elsewhere. The LGM refers to the period between 26,500 and 19,000 years ago. At the time of the coldest LGM, the Sahara Desert, the Arabian Peninsula, and Somalia, south of this region, were the tropical extreme desert. It was a vegetation environment that was almost uninhabitable. The Sahel was farther south than it is now. The climate in which people could live would have been the tropical semi-desert region and parts of what is now Ethiopia. The area below was unsuitable for frail humans, who had to compete with wild beasts from Africa. So they had no choice but to leave Africa in search of a good land to live in. People continued to flock to Anatolia. What about the north of Anatolia and Iran? The north was a temperate desert. Temperate deserts stretched from present-day Central Asia to present-day Ordos in China. You can think of the delicate desert as similar to the Gobi Desert between present-day Mongolia and China. Around the year 20,000, melting begins in the northern hemisphere. 20,000 years ago, global temperatures were 6 degrees Celsius, 11 degrees Fahrenheit, cooler than today. People who hunted mammoths in the steppe tundra region beyond the temperate desert migrated to what is now Anatolia and Iran as the game became less and less common. R1b is a prime example. It coincided with a period when sea levels were rising rapidly. So, the population in this area is gradually increasing. A sudden climate change occurs when Anatolia's population is growing. It was a warming process and abruptly reverted to Ice Age conditions between 12,900 and 11,700 years ago. For about 1,200 years, the Earth got cold again. This period is called Younger Dryas. Around this time, competition for survival must have been fierce in Anatolia and the Fertile Crescent. It coincides with the time when the Neolithic Revolution took place. This was when wild grains were domesticated and cultivated, and wild animals began to be bred. Even the Sahara Desert, uninhabitable for humans, is now changing into grassland. These Sahara changes would have seduced the R1b-V88. They migrated across the Sahara in search of more extensive tracts of land to raise their livestock, settling near Lake Chad. The African Humid Period, or AHP, began between 14,600 and 14,500 years ago. Around the end of the Heinrich event, when icebergs broke off from glaciers and floated in the Atlantic Ocean. That is when the Ballingallorod interstadial began. During the LGM, the Sahara and Arabian deserts were uninhabitable. However, the AHP allowed them to be settled and profoundly impacted the birth of ancient Egyptian civilization and African culture. Most of the Sahara Desert turns into the steppe region. The desert was in what is now Egypt. And there was the Igrab Desert across what is now Algeria and Morocco. The Jaf Desert was in Mali, northern Niger, and southern Algeria. And a semi-desert zone was formed around it. West of the Sahara Desert was the Maghreb Sea and the Agadez Sea in the Niger. In northern Egypt were the Katra Sea and the Gulf of Sidra. And many lakes were formed. Chad was a mega-Chad, bigger than England. Libya also has a vast lake, Megafezan. Traces of mega-scale floods have been found in many Sahara and Arabian deserts. I will introduce this through another video. As Africa became wetter, it created the steppe, much larger than the Fertile Crescent, and many lakes. Evidence that Africans raised cattle during this period can be found in petroglyphs throughout the Sahara Desert. The most substantial evidence of Sahara desertion by R1b peoples related to modern Europeans comes from Tassili en Niger in southern Algeria. Some rock art depicts light-skinned, blonde, or auburn-haired women riding a cow. The R1b-V88 people who left the Levant to live in the Sahara must have flocked to Mega-Chad. The reason for the high R1b population in the region today can be found here. Some groups from the Levant, along with G2 farmers and J1 and T1A goat herders, may have reached the Maghreb along the coastline of northern Africa and crossed the Strait of Gibraltar to Iberia. The African humid period ended 6,000 to 5,000 years ago, or 4000 to 3000 BCE. There were two rapid climate changes during this period. That once was during the Younger Dryas, when the Earth suddenly cooled down like an ice age. As described above, it was the time of the Neolithic agricultural revolution. The other was an 8.2 kiloyear event, 8,200 years ago, or 6,200 BCE, when the global temperature dropped more rapidly than today. 8.2 cooling event severely affected by a 500-year drought in North and East Africa. Mesopotamia was also dried and cooled over 300 years by this event. Influenced by this event, it is believed that the people of Mesopotamia started relational agriculture to overcome the drought. So far, we have looked at R1b that came to Africa. In the following video, we will trace the traces of the Great Flood in the Sahara Desert. Please give thumbs up, subscribe, and turn on notifications.